Hey everybody, this is Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and Scooterwest.com. For all things Vespa and Piaggio, check us out on the web, Scooterwest.com. Parts and accessories, we got you covered. So today I'm going to show you how to make your 150 Liberty or even the 50 Liberty, pretty much a 2017 to the current model year, back to its original European roots. So if you bought one of these in North America, you got these little ears that flap around. They're little flappy turnstiles, very common on nearly all motorcycles and scooters in North America. Oftentimes they can't quite have the correct width for the European turn signal, so they add these little appendages that are rather ugly and no one really likes them. Everybody likes the built-in turnstiles. You turn the scooter on, it's got these really killer looking LED running lights. Well, guess what? Those are the turnstiles in the European market. And the bulbs are already there. Pretty simple job, just some basic wiring. There's only a couple small parts that I recommend getting from Scooterwest.com. And I'll give you the part numbers if you look in the descriptions. But you can magically make these things disappear. And believe me, it's not quite that simple, but it's pretty simple if you watch every step of the video and how I do it. So both the front and the rear, you can have the nice European turnstiles for the front, and check out the rear. So before we get started, I'm going to show you what the stock setup is on a North American Liberty. So on the rear you got these pods, which are very, very standard across like all motorcycles, scooters, everything in North America. But in the rest of the world, this whole entire like built-in assembly is the turnstile. So it's pretty easy to eliminate this and then rewire it to the bulb sockets that are already in here. So we're going to dismantle the rear of the scooter to do that for the rear end, to tidy up the rear end, give it the sporty look. So before you jump into the job, you want to have the correct tools on hand. So number 1 Phillips screwdriver, number 2 Phillips screwdriver, a T30 Torx driver, a T25 Torx driver, which is the smaller size star bit. It's useful to have a needle nose and a diagonal pliers, and also a combination stripper, wire stripper, and crimper right here. Last thing you'll need is some type of 10mm socket, either a 1/4" drive or a combination wrench. So let's get started. So you need a trim tool to remove the couple pieces of trim that hide the fasteners that hold the taillight on. And we have these available at Scooterwest. This is a Mako one, but we have a less expensive set. Tool trim you find on the Scooterwest website, and pretty much just get it right under these plastic covers and they pop off. You don't want to be chiseling that out with a screwdriver and scratch the painted surface. These work perfect for that. And on both the left and right side you got these bumpers. They're either chrome or they may be black if you're on the you have the S version of the Liberty. And you start from the back, don't pry from the front. The reason being is there's this clip that's right here, and the front section's a hook. So go ahead and do that on both the left and right side. Have your T25 and T30 Torx screwdrivers, the star style screwdrivers. And both the left and right side you'll find a larger screw. Go ahead and remove it from both sides and set those aside. And underneath this cover here, there's a single small screw that's right in the center. Not the larger one that holds the rack, there's just a black little screw. Go ahead and remove that. So at this point, you might take a little bit of jimmying in, but you'll be able to get this whole entire taillight assembly out. And that reveals the bulbs for the various functions on here. And you can see there's these bulbs that are kind of lateral on the sides. You got your right with the white and blue, and your left with the pink wire right there. So the bulbs are already in place. There is a clip that holds this wiring harness. You can just lift that up, and the wiring kind of goes further into the bodywork. So you can disconnect this if you like. There is a little tab, you can just lift it and separate that. And as you can see, they only have 3 connections right here. So this harness was like modified for the US market, but all we gotta do is make some simple clips that are pretty easily reversible if needed, and we'll tie these to the turn signal circuit, and then you'll have the standard brake light and tail light that's all built into the center section. So take your T30 screwdriver, and we're going to go ahead and remove these added on stock turn signals. They have the screw here. I already loosened the right side. You got to put your fingers back there. There is a nut that the screw threads into. Don't need to get a wrench up in there, and just go ahead and separate that. You can see the wiring pulls right out. It's got that long screw. Again, save these parts if for some reason you ever want to put this back. And you can see there's a big gaping hole there. Don't worry about that. I'll show you the parts we have at Scooterwest to plug those holes when you're all done with the job. So the easiest way to disconnect these turn signals is remove the lens and the reflector and disconnect the two connections behind here. There is also a connector that's located underneath. If you bought a brand new pod turn signal, it'll actually have the harness and everything with it. But that harness comes in handy when tying into the built-in taillight turn signal assembly. So you pop that out. I just removed the little screw, and you can see the two connections right under here, and they just pull right off. So go ahead and you can just pull that little connection off. It's just a little bit stuck onto these two flag terminals right there. And at this point, you can just pull the wires right through that rubber grommet right there. Put this all together if you want to keep it with the screw and the lens. And go ahead and repeat with your other side, the right side here. So from underneath the fender, you can pull these wires out. You'll find these plastic retainers. They could be separated. And at this point, we want to get the wiring up into the cavity where the taillight assembly is. So you just kind of want to route these wires. You can pull them where they're under a clip right there. I know I can't really see what I'm doing, but there they are, just like such right here. And you're gonna have to work your way to get these wires back up into this cavity up here. And you can even see where the connectors originally were. So there's one of them. Just kind of pull it up through. And the same goes with the right side. I can see the connectors kind of back here. We could route the wiring up through this side right here. And now we just need to make some simple splices. So I recommend using these Posi Tap connectors, and we have these available at Scooterwest. I think our part number is EC1L. So you want to have two of these for making easy, quick, solderless splice without any type of crimp. They're very rugged to vibration. The crimp fasteners work great as long as you have a good quality crimper as well. But the nice thing about these, they're easy to reverse if you ever need to. Yeah. Also have a set of wire strippers handy, and we'll trace the wiring to this connector. You can see that pink wire, which was my left turn signal on that part of the harness, and it leads to this darker of the two blues. So kind of just follow the pink wire to the connection that's the darker blue, and it looks like it's this one right here. That one's just your ground. And the best thing you could do with that for right now is there's just enough room in the tubing. It doesn't really short with anything because it is the same reference as frame ground, but you could kind of just shove it into the tubing to set it aside, so if you ever want to reuse it. But you're gonna go ahead and sacrifice this connection here. You could keep that if you ever wanted to splice it back together. So go ahead and make the cut. Strip the end of that wire just about 1/4 inch off, or even less than that. And take your wire splice, unthread the ferrule on it just a little bit. Stick that all the way in. You know, just a little bit past where it wants to set, then thread that on. And then make sure it's tight, give it a tug, and it's got a nice solid wire connection right there. And then we'll do the same with the other side. You want to look at the connector, find where the white with blue wire leads. If you do make a mistake and get the wrong wire, it's not going to hurt anything. It's just not going to blink the turn signal, and then you splice the other wire. So keep that in mind if you make a mistake. Not that difficult to fix it. It's not going to burn anything out. Another way, if you're unsure what wire does have the positive voltage for the blinking turn signals, have a basic test light or a voltmeter, whatever you have. You don't need anything. You could even just have an old light bulb. You know, the one that came with your turn signals, you know, don't need anything special, but you want to ground this, your test light, and then we'll turn the turn signal on. I'll turn the right side, and you'll see that blinks fast, and I'll show you. So that one's not it. It's not blinking my test light. This one is the correct one because he has blinking my red test light. So even though the red wire looks like maybe a positive, it's really this wire, so the longer wire, just like the other side. So just like the left side, go ahead and just, the ground wire that's not used, we can just push it back into the sheathing, just to get it out of the way. Cut the terminal off, save it if you like. Strip the wiring. And take your posi lock splice. Got a tight connection. Next we'll move on to the taillight assembly. So you want to take your taillight assembly, see the pink wire and the white with blue wire. And as close as you can to this sheathing, go ahead and cut those wires. Don't cut the ground wire or any other wires on there. And just give it the cut so it's kind of protected back there. It's not going to short with anything. And do the same with the other side. And again, if you ever had to reverse this, you could strip back a little of that sheathing there and re-splice the wires if needed. So go ahead and strip a small section off both of these wires. The nice thing about these existing turn signals is they're pretty long. So you just match up the sides. So pretty much right goes to this right turn signal right here. And if you're wondering about all the parts I use for this installation video, just look in the description of the video. I know that's kind of hard to do sometimes on YouTube these days, but just look in there. I'll put links to all the parts you need, the list. But there you go. You got the left and the right turn signals connected, and then you could plug this tail and brake light connector back in. And of course, if you want to, you could even leave it connected for the whole job. It's not, just makes it a lot easier if it's out of the way. Make sure it snaps. You don't want to have a loose connection and lose your tail light, brake light. So you hear that little snap, you know it's all good. And I'm pretty confident it will work, but you could test, you know, power up the scooter, test everything before you tuck all the wiring back in. So gotta make sure none of this wiring gets pinched. Just tuck it up into the bodywork. And then the turn signal just goes back in place. We'll put all the screws in there. So let's see if it all works. So I have a turn signal on my right, turn signal on the left, and a brake light. So all our lights work. It's got that Euro slick look. Of course, the visibility is a little bit better with the pods, I'll admit. They do work a little bit better. So to fill these garish looking holes, you got 1-inch round plugs, and the part number at Scooterwest, if you want to buy them from us, is cap RND-1, I think, for this one. It's like a 1-inch hole plug. It's going to have quite a tight fit. And it's really intended for tubing, but it happens to fill the hole pretty good. So, and if you wanted to, you can even put some silicone sealant in there. And then for the smaller hole, this part number, it's a 1/4-inch round hole plug or a 5/16 round one. Either one will work. You carve it out, put the 5/16 one. And the Scooterwest part number on these is, I think it's PLUG, so plug RND, plug round dash 1/4-inch, 1/4, snaps right in there. And we'll do the same with the other side. And alternatively, if you really want to nerd out, you could certainly buy the whole rear fender. It's pretty inexpensive because it's unpainted. And if you replace the whole fender, then these fenders were intended for the European and Asian market, so there is no holes drilled into them. These were drilled after the fact. So that kind of cleans up a lot better than just having the big holes. And if you wanted to, you could put some silicone sealant up there if you want to stabilize them. Now put the screws back in place for your taillight and snap all those trim pieces in. So we're pretty much done with the modifications for the rear. Definitely gives it a sporty look. I'm not going to do this to the scooter, but if you really wanted to get nuts with it, you could lop the rear fender, take the license frame. This is a metal plate that has 3 screws, and you could shift it up and drill new holes, cut the fender, and give it a nice look where you see more of the tire. Don't really want to modify this because the fender is pretty handy if you ever ride to a puddle, keeps it off your back. But if you're looking for that sporty look, that's always a cool mod, is to hack the fender, give it kind of a tail tidy look to it. Alternatively, if you really want to go wild, you could just lop this whole fender and make your own custom plate frame. If you get rid of this whole fender, the rear is quite sporty looking, but you got to work on a solution to mount the plate, and technically you need a light for the plate, and the reflector will be missing as well. So keep that in mind if you're going to go a little wild with it. So all 3 screws are back in place. The little cover snaps in there. Of course, you leave that out if you're putting the plate kit to put a top case or something. So these things just snap back in place. I'm doing the wrong side. I'm not even paying attention, but there's a left and a right. So you snap it in. This makes a snap. All right. So let's move on to the front of the scooter. It's a little bit more work to do the front. In order to remove these turnstile pods and convert to the full Euro setup, you're going to need to dismantle the front handlebar cover and also the front leg shield. Start with a Phillips screwdriver, number 2 size, and both the left and the right side. From the back side, there's going to be screws that retain the rear cover to the front, or vice versa, actually hold the front to the rear. The rear is attached to the handlebars. So go ahead and pull both those screws out. We got the left side screw out, and right under here is one more Phillips screw. You might want to magnetize your screwdriver. This screwdriver is not magnetized, so let's see if I blow it. It doesn't want to pull the screw, but I'm too lazy to get a magnetized screwdriver. I do have a needle nose handy. Go surgically extract that screw here. And pretty much those screws are real similar, but that one in the center on the front is a little bit different. Stick your fingers in here, and there's some tabs that you gotta pop off, especially on a new one. It's all pretty tight. So you get your finger in these holes. Of course, the mirrors are removed, or they're not even installed on this bike yet. And if you're having trouble popping the tab, you could go in there and give it a little pry with this screwdriver. And it looks like it's separated there. And I just kind of tipped it up and pulled it away, and it disconnects all this stuff. And I know it's a little tight in here. 3 connections you're going to want to pull, and you'll see the connectors when I get this out. There's a halogen headlight bulb. It's pretty tight in here. It is possible to put an LED, a real shallow LED. Just not much room to put an LED headlight in these. But then you have your left turnstile with the pink and black wire, and then your right turnstile with the white and blue wire. So go ahead and disconnect those and pull that away. So You're wondering how these turnstile pods are attached. It's a pair of studs with 10mm nuts that hold them in place. So you just take a little socket, any type of socket, a wrench, it doesn't really matter what you use, and we could just go ahead and remove these. And it's optional. You could take those same 1/4-inch round plug holes and fill the holes that are left behind that they drill into this painted cover. Lift that little thing, and now that's separated, and do the same with the other side. And again, you could technically splice it so you have both, but I haven't really tested it on this scooter. It may overload the flasher relay or possibly even overload the circuit. These bulbs are only 10 watts, they don't draw much, so just under amp. I don't think it will have a problem, but if that's something you want to do, you could certainly experiment with that. Pretty much just giving you the gist of how to get to all this stuff. So there you go, got that cleaned up. We'll leave that all apart for now. We'll kind of de-trim the front of the scooter, start dismantling it. You want to take your trim tool, pop these chrome or the black covers off each of the sides. Just get it in between the seam. Start from the top. And they just pop right off. So both these left and right sides, there's going to be a pair of screws. And remove these screws here. And right behind the leg shield, right at the top, so my screwdriver's right here, and just right behind your T25 Torx driver again, remove the black screw. So both the left and right side, you're going to get rid of these 3 screws here, or pull them out and not get rid of them. And then moving further down, there's a screw right next to that reflector. And the same length as that other one. Go ahead and remove that screw from the other side. So this front badge is pretty difficult to remove. Unfortunately, you just got to get in there and pry it out. And you pry it from, if you're sitting on the scooter, it would be your left side. Single screw underneath. T25 Torx driver will remove that screw. And then we have some difficult trim pieces to remove. So you get plastic trim tool. You definitely want to have a trim tool to get this piece off. And you want to get it in between either the chrome, or it might be you might have the chrome delete kit that has the black one, the S model. So you get it between these 2 pieces, and it will take some pretty aggressive pops to get this all separated from the frame. You don't want to pry on it because that's how you break the tabs. So there you go, get those all separated. And now at this point, we're going to go ahead and separate this piece. And it kind of lifts up and pulls away. And there's a couple more fasteners located underneath this piece. You get that out of the way, you can see it threads right into this thing. So there's a large screw located right in the center. And also FYI, if you don't know, that's where your fuses are. All these are your fuse blocks. So if you're wondering where the fuses are on this scooter, it's a little bit of work to get to them, but that's where they're located. and the screws that hold the painted part. These are real small screws, a little bit different than anything else, so keep them separate from some of the other black screws. Again, using just the Torx drivers to get all these screws separated. And you can see the ABS pump, some other electronic modules under here. And typically remove this whole front leg shield. You got to dismantle these scooters pretty far. So it's not going to separate all the way. We just want to get it enough where we could get to the wiring and the bulb sockets. So my goal is not to have to dismantle this whole entire scooter here. And one thing to keep in mind is when we pull this off, you don't want this grinding on this fender here. So it'd be a good idea to throw a like microfiber or shop rag on top of your fender. So short of removing this whole piece, which requires removing all the floorboard in the back to get this whole thing separated, we just have just enough room where I could fit my hands in here. And if you look inside these lenses, you can see the bulb. And if your hands are really big, you might find somebody has smaller hands. You get in there, it's just a bayonet style connector. Go ahead and twist it, you know, like less than a quarter turn, and then the bulb socket will come right out. They don't exactly make this that easy on these scooters, unfortunately. The Vespa is definitely a little easier to get to these. So there's your bulb socket. And you do the same on the other side, squeeze your hand in there. You may be able even to come up through here and get these bulb sockets out. The nice thing, they already got the bulb in there. The idea is we just got to make the electrical connections to these connectors here. We do have the proper connectors for these, but they need some very specialized crimp tools that make those connections. But I'll show you how to improvise and it will work just fine. So go ahead and remove the bulb socket. Again, it's just a quarter turn. You can kind of push it down. It's obviously a tight fit. You can't see what you're doing, but it's a lot more work to dismantle this whole entire front end. And once you retrieve the bulb socket, put the bulb in it, there you go, popped right out. And I'll show you the wiring harness that we could salvage from the existing pod turn signals to make the connections. Normally I had like a sealed amp style connector that's for this. Like I suggested, there is a special crimp tool. We have all that stuff at the shop, but I'm trying to show you how to do this as a do-it-yourselfer at home. Don't have all the professional crimp tools. So let's get down. We're going to dismantle this turn signal, just like the rears. So you separate those terminals, and you're able to feed the wiring right through this rubber stock of the turn signal. Get those both out of the way. And now that you salvage this wiring harness, the polarity is not all that important for these turn signals. You know, if you're going to put an LED bulb in here, they are a weird offset pin, so it's pretty difficult to find the LED bulb. The incandescence included with it works fine. So ironically, these funky little terminals, they will go right onto the prongs inside this socket. So you can use your needle nose, and they push on there and they'll stay very tight. So you can see that's rather tight. And then do the same with the other one. And for an added measure, we'll put a zip tie just to hold that, make sure the wires don't get ever yanked out. It's kind of an improvised measure, but it does the trick just fine. You put a zip tie right here, and I would say that would stay secure for the life of the vehicle, no problem. So you pull back some of that sheathing, put the zip tie around here. There you go, you made an electrical connection for your turn signal. And even before you put it all back together, you can certainly test it. Unfortunately, I don't think these are long enough to make the connection up to the top, but let's just give it a test, see what it does. So turn the key on, there you go. And it looks pretty cool when it's inside this correct European style housing right here. So once again, now that you modify both the left and right side, you got the connectors on them. Get ready to put your small hands in here and pop these back in place. And they're like a quarter turn, so make sure they're locked in place. The last thing you need is put it all back together and the bulb falls out when you go down on a ride. So again, you can kind of even get to it a little bit right here, so that, you know, if you want to work it from both angles, whatever works best. And eventually you'll see the bulb pop through. And the one thing is there's 3 prongs on these sockets, so they only go one direction. So you might have to fumble with it for a bit until you can find the correct location for it. There we go. So now that's all secure. For now, I'll just leave the connectors out and I'll do the same for the left side. So now that we got the painful installation of the bulb sockets, as you can see, we salvaged the harnesses from your old pod turn signals. The downside is these aren't going to automatically reach. 2 ways to go about it. You can hack the wiring on the scooter, which I wouldn't recommend. I would almost just recommend hacking this wire here and adding probably about another foot of wire. And you can use more of those posi locks that are nice and easy to use, just like we did for the rear, or you could just use a crimp terminal. Or if you really want to nerd out, you could extend it, put solder to the joints, heat shrink it, but you know, crimp terminal or posi lock is perfectly adequate for this application. So I'm going to go ahead and cut some of the insulation back, and you cut this insulation, see how it's nibbled around it, and now you could just cut the wires right here. So then we'll splice in some extra length here. So we'll do that for both the left and the right side. All right, so go ahead and strip the wires about 1/4 inch off each of them. Do the same with the connectors. And then you'll take your extra lengths of wire here. You know, right now I'm using, I don't know, what's this, about 1 foot of wire, 20 gauge if you're wondering what the size. Don't want to use something like 12 gauge. You could probably use 20 gauge, 18 gauge, 16 would be a little on the thick side, more than you need, but the original wiring is only 20 gauge for this circuit. Put a pair of crimp butt splices, as they call these, or alternatively you could use those the posi locks. You need 8 of them total. So you want to have a really good crimper to do crimp terminals, not those real cheesy stamped steel things. And once that's on there, give it the little tug test. Make sure the wire does not pull out. Tug test. And there's many different ways you can insulate this. I mean, this is fully insulated the way it is. It'd probably be just fine. But alternatively, you could put tubing over it. We'll put a little bit of electrical tape just to kind of seal it off, kind of tidy up the wiring. So put the terminal on it. We'll pretty much repeat this whole entire step with the other side. Then the connector that was cut off gets spliced back on. If you really want to nerd out, you can even get the wire colors perfectly. One's a light blue, one's a dark blue. And of course, this is satisfactory wiring. If I was doing this in my shop or even at home where I have a soldering iron, I would certainly have the skills to solder the wiring. I would certainly do that. Another thing you could do is you could always twist the wiring to kind of give it a nice you know, kind of so it holds its shape. And just to show you a sample before we turn on, we'll plug one in just to show you how it works and check the work before we go any further. So there you go. turn signals are now in the leg shield. Now obviously we got to route the wiring correctly, and I'll do that last. So let me do the other side and we'll be back in a moment. Kind of an optional step, kind of cleans it up, easy to do. Just standard electrician's electrical vinyl tape. And of course, if you do a tubing, that's much nicer, but I don't expect everybody to have a cornucopia of different size vinyl electrical tubings that you'd route wiring through. It's certainly something you could buy or salvage from some other wiring, but just kind of cleans it up. You probably just leave it bare and it would be fine as well, but might as well clean it up. And there's our little harness. The cool thing is if you ever want to undo this whole entire project, you can unconnect the wires from the light, put the pods back together, and put it all back together if you really wanted to. So getting the wires all routed up through the handlebars here. There's some specifics to how you want to route this. You see how the wiring all turns right here? The electrical wiring goes towards the back, but there's this one extra spot for wiring to pass through. And this nice clamp kind of keeps all the wiring all tidy and keeps it from binding. And it's pretty easy to route through that clamp. So there's this little clip right here. And I'll go ahead and lift it up. Don't lose the clip because you can't really easily get this clip. So pull that little clip out. And then we could just pop this little tab. And make sure none of the wires get out of place. We can leave some good amount of slack up here. For both the left and the right in the bodywork. Very important whenever you do something like this, you don't want any of the wiring to bind with anything, or it's the last thing you want is your steering the bind up because the wiring's not routed correctly. So once you get the wires in there, go ahead and clip this back into place. It should just snap back in. Sorry, my hand's in the way. But you got your wires all up here. And once you know it's all set up right, we'll put the metal clip back in. So that metal clip just snaps right over this little tab right here. Get the idea there. Don't lose that clip. That's your clip for the wiring. So I left, like I said, I used about a foot of wire to extend it. You leave some slack in there so when you turn, the wiring moves freely without any issues, and then we can make these connections up here. And you could just put these right underneath your speedometer and double check it before we put everything back together. So turn the lights on. Got your left and your right, works perfect. So now it's just time to kind of reverse the steps, put all the screws back in place, and the scooter's all back together. So. Thanks. So congratulations, you made it through my whole entire video on all the steps on liberating your scooter, liberating your Liberty to its European roots, and eliminating the ugly pods. So thanks again for watching. This is Robot here for Vespa Motorsport and Scooterwest.com. The first time you come across this channel, of course, you know what to do. Subscribe and hit the like button. Helps us out. I continue to get motivated to make lots of awesome videos, almost exclusively for Vespa and sometimes the Piaggio products. So bye-bye pods.